On this episode of Africa's Big Switch, the ABS team sat together with Chinenye Ajayi. Chinenye is an energy professional and a versatile commercial lawyer with over a decade of experience. She currently is the team lead of the Power and Infrastructure Practice at Chinenye Ajayi LP, where she provides legal and business advisory services to clients within the energy sector. She's particularly focused on the renewable energy space and volunteers across a number of activities in the energy space, including being a coordinator for the African Fellowship of Young Energy Leaders, a venture designed to invest in the next generation of energy leaders.
Hi again, and welcome to another episode of Africa's Big Switch. My name is Bolaji Akinlali, and I'll be hosting today with Hassana Jafia. We have a special guest today on the show. Her name is Chinenye Ajayi. Hi, Chinenye. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Bolaji. Thank you so much for having me.
No, the pleasure is ours. Chinenye is going to be talking to us today about the electricity market in Nigeria from a legal and regulatory perspective. But before we get into the details, can you give us a few lines about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Chinenye Ajayi. I'm a lawyer. I'm an energy professional, a bit of an entrepreneur, and I work with Olaniwa Ajayi LP as the team lead for the Power and Infrastructure team. And I guess that's really it about me.
Really cool. I know Chinenye has been modest there.
Well, yeah. So, okay. Maybe perhaps I could just share a little more. So, I get apart from my legal work, right? I get to participate in a number of other activities within the energy sector. Currently, I serve as the vice president project of the Energy Institute Young Professionals Network. I also volunteer with a fellowship program called African Fellowship for Young Energy Leaders, where I serve as a program coordinator. Essentially, the program is aimed at, training young energy leaders within the African space to be able to provide real energy, life sustainable solutions to their various communities. So we have fellows all over Africa coming in on the program. Yeah, so there's just a few of the things I do. But yes, I major within the energy sector.
That's really cool. And can you tell us how or why you go into the energy space?
Interesting. So, typically when, people say when you find a problem that bothers you a lot, then you know that you have a role in solving that problem. So I guess that's how it started off for me. For some reason growing up, I wasn't really comfortable with power outages. I always wondered why we never had 24 hour, 24/7 power. And for me, I felt like I had a role to play in solving this problem. So being a lawyer, I thought that the best way, to contribute to solving this problem is, majoring within the energy sector. So that kind of spurred my interest. And, I started reading about the energy sector, understanding the challenges, the problems. And beyond that, beyond the legal aspect as well, I felt I can make an impact, directly, which also formed my interest in participating with other programs aimed at solving the electricity problems in Nigeria and in Africa. So really the desire to get into the energy sector was born out of my passion about solving the energy problem in Nigeria, because if you look at it, electricity in particular, is foundational to the success of any economy. So that was it. That was it for me, really.
Thank you, Chinenye. So would you be able to share with us, should I say, the step-by-step process of how you are able to transition into this space? Let's say I'm a lawyer and I'm interested in doing this. What would you share with me?
Okay, I remember when I started out, I didn't have a clue about what the energy sector was all about. But one thing I knew was that I wanted to be part of this space. I wanted to contribute my quota to solving the problems, and I wanted to add value. So I think the first thing to start off with is interest, real strong interest, because the power sector is quite complicated. And as if you follow the power sector, particularly within Nigeria, you see that it's been evolving over time. So first and foremost is interest. And once your interest is well ignited, I think the next thing I need to do is to get knowledgeable. I remember one of the things I did was I remember the first day I started my journey, I typed on Google history of power in electricity in Nigeria. And that was where I started from. I went as far back to understanding the basics, like how did we get here? I started, worked my way back from then until where we are today. And beyond Nigeria, I also began to look at other African countries, other countries outside Africa, understanding the challenges. I began to, study the various value chain we have within the Nigerian power sector. So I think the first thing is, once you have the interest, you're going to get in knowledgeable. Then the third thing is to get into the space. The network. You need to begin to build a network of people within the space, get connected, whether on LinkedIn or joining organizations or conferences that bother within this area, so that you get recognized within the space. And I think the fourth thing again is to clearly understand what aspect, because the power sector is really wide, in that there are various areas that you can actually specialize in. So you need to now begin to think about, what area do I want to work in? Do I want to be a lawyer? Do I want to be an engineer? Do I want to be a consultant? Do I want to be a financial advisor? There are a number of that. So you need to now pick up what aspect of the power sector do you want to major on, and then of course begin to build capacity in that area. Begin to put yourself out there as being one interested in this area and one who is actually knowledgeable. Yeah, and I guess it just goes on from there.
I completely agree. And you mentioned that you need to get into the space, and the power sector is really wide. So going into the detail a little bit, can you tell us a little bit about the electricity market or the power sector in Nigeria, especially from a legal regulatory perspective? So who are the key players and what does that look like? I know that you might have to talk a little bit about the value chain for some of the people that may not be familiar with how that works a bit. So a brief overview of the electricity markets in Nigeria would be perfect.
Okay, I hope I can keep that brief. Okay, so in terms of foundation, right? So if you follow the Nigeria power sector actually started out with what we all know as NEPA, Nigeria Electricity Power Authority, and it was a government agency that practically monopolized the entire power sector. Now, the power sector essentially is divided into three major value chain. So you start with the generators, or GenCos, like they are called. Generators are, the companies, right, that generate electricity, right? Then we have transmission. So transmission is like the big high tension wires you see on the street sometimes that will power from the generation companies to the distribution network. So the distribution network is like it's still a network, but it's of a lower power tension that gets the electricity to the various houses, for use in our daily activities. So these are like the three major chain in the power sector. So previously, this sector has always the entire value chain was handled by NEPA, but due to inefficiencies, lack of profitability, and a number of other issues, it became became expedient to bring in private participation, to promote growth and to improve efficiency, and of course to improve the power situation in Nigeria. So that led to the unbundling, or some people call it privatization of the power sector. And that happened around 2003 to 2005, around that time. And what happened was, the generation facilities of NEPA were sold to private individuals. So private companies acquired those. The distribution networks as well were also sold to private sector participants. But the transmission aspect, which is like the middle of the value chain, was retained by the government agency. And there was then established what was called the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trader. So it was like a government agency that was meant to act like a buffer, because one of the challenges, and still the challenge of the power sector, is liquidity, funding. The discos were not able to, more like pay the full value of electricity. So, pending when the market becomes fully viable. So MBET was more like a middleman. MBET buys electricity from the generation companies and sell to distribution companies. So MBET receives money from distribution companies and pay to the generation companies, sort of. So that's like what we have, what we've had all this while. But of course, there are a number of challenges from poor infrastructure to lack of finance to policy issues, political interference at various points. All of this led to a number of innovations along the line. But just to mention a key player again is NEC. NEC meaning Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. So that's the key regulator of the power sector. So, they get to churn out rules, regulation guidelines that govern the power sector. And so despite this privatization, or what we call unbundling, the challenges around the power sector still persist. There has been little or no improvement from what we had with NEPA. And, we still have, liquidity issues, a number of other issues. And because of this, there have been a number of improvements. As you may be aware, recently, there was a constitutional amendment that now allowed state governments to make laws with respect to generation, transmission, and distribution. Previously, it was electricity was majorly handled at the federal level. So now state governments now have, I think it just happened earlier this year. And then we also now have a new Electricity Act that kind of reinforces what the constitutional amendment has had made. So essentially, what this means is that the market is a lot more open, a lot more opportunities. So private sector participants can come in and deal directly with states. States can now have their own electricity markets. They can also have their own electricity regulators. The market is a lot more open, and the objective is still the same: to get a viable power sector, to improve power supply, to improve efficiencies within the power sector. So this is just it in summary in terms of overview, as looking at it from the past to where we are now. Yeah, I hope that's sufficient.
Yes, that's a very great overview. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to get a bit more, should I say, detailed. So I would like to ask, what aspect you focus on in the power sector, or are you more on a broader scale? And what's your day-to-day like in this industry?
Okay, like I said, I'm a lawyer, so my I major within the legal and the regulatory space. So legal here means we provide legal support, advisory to players within the sector. We advise we advise government agencies, federal government, state governments that are engaged in power projects. We also advise project sponsors that are setting up projects in Nigeria and in Africa, actually. And we also advise financiers. So we have local financiers, we have DFIs, that's development finance institutions like the EFC World Bank, that are financing power projects in Nigeria. So we advise them as well. So what we try to do is help whoever is investing or having anything to do with the power sector to understand what the power sector is, like help them navigate through its peculiar challenges, right? And also ensure that their interests are adequately protected, whether you are a project developer. So we help you with your project development from your EPC contract, so your construction contract of your power plants, to your SLAs, your operational maintenance agreements. We also help you with reviewing your finance or loan agreements if you are getting facility from a sponsor. And we also help you with regulatory compliances, so like your licenses, your approvals, and everything you need to set up a business in a project, a power plant in Nigeria. And then we also get to do a lot of off-grid work. I forgot to mention that within the electricity market. So we have an off-grid space that are meaning power plants that operate outside the national grid, as the transmission lines. So we get to do a lot of work in terms of companies that are looking to develop their independent power plants. So they're not looking to the national grid to get power. So they set up their own individual power plants that supply either their companies or their factories or their businesses with power. So essentially, that's a summary of what we do. Rather, I do on a day-to-day basis within the sector. Yes.
Amazing. You're a very busy person. So thank you for doing this. So you mentioned NEPA, and for those that are listening, NEPA is the National Electric Power Authority. And I remember then when they bring lights in Lagos, everyone shouting up NEPA.
Yeah,
or maybe
right.
we shouldn't have been saying up NEPA, because it seems like they weren't really doing a good job. So, but yeah, that's just that by the side. Earlier on, you spoke about some of the challenges in terms of liquidity, infrastructure, and that has led to a lot of regulation and a lot of changes in the electricity market, which is quite exciting. You mentioned one which I was actually going to ask earlier, which is the electricity bill from, I think that was signed this year by the president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, into law. And that allows states to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity within their borders. So I guess my question following on from this would be, what do you see to be the opportunities that would spur out from this regulation? Who might be some key stakeholders that would like to play into this? So in terms of investors, maybe independent system operators, or just others that you think would be interested in to take advantage of this new regulation?
Okay, so first, I just wanted to just mention that the recent amendment essentially give the state governments the power to make laws, not really to do projects. I like to always draw that distinction, because it wasn't as though state government couldn't do power projects within their states before the amendment or before the Electricity Act. They could do that, except that, of course, they need to get to the states, to the federal level, or to NERC, which is the federal regulator, to get necessary licenses and approvals. So they could actually do projects. But right now, what they now have is, in addition to that, they could now make laws and regulate generation and transmission and distribution. So what this actually means is that every state is like, the opportunity has been thrown up. Grow at your pace. What can you do in terms of solving the electricity needs within your state? So you can make laws. So this means that state can actually make laws that are suited for their purpose, to attract the right kind of investors that they need, right? To to improve the power situation within their respective states. So people, in terms of the opportunities, so there are a number of opportunities. First, for project developers. So if you are a company that's into the power sector, there's an opportunity to approach 36 states. Well, okay, maybe 35, let's exclude FCT, but you can approach any of the states in Nigeria and make a proposal of developing a power plant, for them. And this could be a thermal power plant or even renewables. And as we know, renewables are much more easier to implement and to scale, right? And it also means that even for lawyers, for instance, it means you can begin to advise state government on how to develop a viable electricity market, a viable legal framework to support, the investment that will be coming into the state. It's also an opportunity for financiers, right? So if you're looking at a project to, to finance and get good returns. It means that you can approach a state and, offer to finance their project, or you can approach project developers that are looking for opportunities within states. Okay, this also means there are opportunities for engineers. Okay, it essentially means that there'll be a lot more engineering work in terms of setting up power plants within the state. There's also opportunities for consultants, market consultants that are very, in terms of that are skilled in setting up market, developing strategies, is an opportunity as well for them at the various state level. And this is also opportunity for renewable energy. I like to say that renewable energy is a lot more faster to deploy, like we all know, and it's like the lowest hanging fruit that each and every state can take advantage of. So players within renewable energy space, these are great opportunities. These are great opportunities for you to approach the states, approach companies or entities within the state to actually provide these services to them. So the opportunities are enormous, and it's not just the opportunities in the power sector, but the implication means, because the more power you have, it means more businesses can crop up, right? More businesses are becoming much more viable and more profitable. So the effect is not just within the power sector, but in the long run, it impacts on other sectors within the state, and of course in Nigeria ultimately.
Amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. I always tell, so whenever I get a chance to talk about like the things I'm interested in, I always say that energy is such a massive enabler to our development as a country, Nigeria, and also as a continent in Africa, because with energy, you can power not just your industries, but also your health centers, your schools, and the list goes on, right? So I think I completely agree with you. And while you were saying that, I think a question that came to mind, and I'm not sure if, so a question that came to mind is electricity trading in Nigeria. I don't know how familiar you are with this space, but I was just curious to understand how electricity has been traded across the value chain and how that works in Nigeria.
Okay, when you mean electricity trading, do you mean selling to customers, or you mean trading within, like bulk trading within the players?
Yeah, I think I mean bulk trading.
Oh, okay. Okay, so prior to the amendments, right, or the Electricity Act, we majorly have had one trader, even though the EPSRA, which is the former act that the former act that was repealed that regulated the power sector, provided for trading licenses. So essentially, trading means you're buying in bulk from a generation company and selling to a distribution company, right? Who then, of course, sell to the customers. Now, majorly, we've only had one trader, which is the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company. And what they do is that they have a PPA with the Gencos. They buy electricity from them, and of course, we sell to the distribution companies. But in recent times, we've seen the regulator provide, or rather give trading licenses to several applicants. Right? We're actually working on one currently. And what they do is, okay, so it's like, let's assume I'm a trading company, I'm interested in trading. I get a trading license. I approach a major generation company and say, I need to buy 50 megawatts of electricity from you, and I want to sell to another customer somewhere else. Now, to get that done, of course, electricity is not a commodity that you can move from one place to another. It has to go through wires, right? So you now necessarily need to have agreements with the owners of the wire. So let's assume you need to pass your electricity through a transmission line. Typically, you have what is called transmission use of service agreement that allows you to use the transmission lines, right? Of course, you pay them for the service and then to pass the electricity to the consumer. If you need to use a distribution line to pass it, it means that you need to get into an agreement that is called distribution use of service agreement that allows you to use a distribution network to pass electricity to your customer ultimately. And, this trading has opened up a lot of opportunities, meaning that companies can decide to buy electricity specifically right, to meet their needs, rather than relying on the grid that is, very unstable in terms of electricity supply. So we have that trading. And remember, with the new act, that has been kind of standardized. So there's a regime for electricity trading. And interestingly, there's something else called electricity supply, which we expect to, that will be implemented in the coming days, that allows, so, this time around is at the lower level between the distribution networks and the end customers, So we have the bulk traders at the higher end, and then we have suppliers or marketers, like some people call it, at the lower end. But yeah, so that's what it looks like right now. It's not really all established yet, but we believe that as things progress, the market will begin to take shape gradually.
That's really, really insightful. Like, I'm learning so much from you already. And we're just like 20 minutes in. I can't imagine what else to expect. But I have a quick question regarding your experience. So I remember one of the things you mentioned was that you drafted help draft loan and finance agreements for this space. So let's say in terms of financing, what's the common challenges that you faced? And do you have like any stories that maybe you could share and how you were able to overcome these challenges?
Financing in the power sector is a very peculiar one. And there's been a lot of challenge in that area for various reasons. So let me just give a little background. During the privatization period, a lot of banks lent to private entities are looking to buy these assets, both at the distribution end and the generation end. They lent massively, really large sums to these companies, and of course they lent these monies with the understanding that this project will be viable and that they'll be able to get their funds back, of course, with a reasonable return on their investment. But as we've seen in the past few years, that didn't actually pan out as they expected. First, because the purchasers of these assets later found out that, the asset wasn't as good as they thought it was. That was one. And then, of course, there are a number of other things that needed to be set up to make the assets viable that didn't happen. So essentially, the most particularly discos, because, the discos are like the collectors in the value chain. So the money they collect trickles down to every other person, to the ISOs, to the Gencos, all down. So if they are unable to collect enough, it means the entire value chain suffers. And so they've not, because of a number of issues like what we call ATC and C losses. I'm not getting too technical, right? But ATC and C losses means aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. They are unable to collect sufficient funds from customers. Just in addition with the fact that most customers don't like to pay, right? And because of that, many of them couldn't meet up with their payment obligation in their financing contracts. And if you follow the trend, you will see that many banks are beginning to enforce their loan agreement in terms of taking over their shares of the borrowers from these discos. A lot of them, in fact, I think sometime, was it last year or so, NEC had to, I think, take over a number of the discos, the management of a number of discos, because they're actually running at a loss. Some couldn't even pay salaries, That has been a challenge. And, with this trend, it kind of discouraged other investors from putting in money within the sector, because there is no assurance that if I invest in a power project in Nigeria, I'm going to get my money back. Which I feel, and this is very foundational if we're going to move the sector forward, we need to get the sector to a point, right, where investors are confident that if I put my money here, I'm going to get it. Until then, you might really struggle, with getting investors within this. So that's one of the challenges we see in the financing area. And in fact, most particularly local banks in Nigeria, they are not they have kind of withdrawn from lending to discos in particular. right? And that's why if you notice over time, because of the backlog of debts piling up on the books of these distribution companies, the CBN, the federal government had to put in intervention funds at various points. And even at that, there are still backlogs of debts to be paid, right? And one of the causes of this is the lack of cost reflective tariff, right? So many times the discourse will say the cost of electricity is, or rather what the customers pay is less than the actual cost of electricity, right? And our customers of their own end say, I can't afford to pay more when I'm not getting good service. So it's all complicated, right? But that's the challenge, with respect to the financing space. But what we expect to see is with the opening up of state markets, we expect that they take the right initiative to set up legal frameworks that would incentivize investors, to make that investment, and they are giving assurance that they are able to charge cost-reflective tariffs, they're able to remain profitable and pay back their loans. That is the key interest for every financer. So what we've been able to do as a firm is to help, depending on who we're advising, right? If you're advising a project developer, we try to structure your company, your transaction in such a way that makes you attractive to investors or to financiers, right? And if you're working on the other side, advising a financing institution, what we try to do is help them look out for projects that are actually viable, notwithstanding, because the challenges are there, but nevertheless, we still need to make progress. So what we try to do is, notwithstanding the challenges, to find, commercially sustainable solutions that we can offer to these financing institutions that give them confidence to make this investment, and we assure them that they have adequate security, and in the event of a default, they wouldn't lose their funding. So that's what we've done, and of course we still provide some regulatory support to government agencies with respect to helping them set up frameworks that would boost the viability of the sector.
Wow, it was really heartbreaking to hear. This is what's going on in terms of, should I say, financing and recovering finances from customers. But again, it's not surprising, because we do know what the current state is right now. So on that note, I would also like to ask, I don't know how often you follow up after, should I say, getting all these agreements in place, and then the customers are able to get funding from investors. But are you aware of any success stories so far whereby the investors have been very happy with the outcome and things like that?
Yes. There have been a number of them, lots of them actually. And well, of course, I can't mention names for confidentiality reasons, but we've had a number of very successful financings. And interestingly, most of these financings have been in the off-grid space. In the off-grid space is particularly because, there are thresholds that the regulator, that determines when the regulator steps in. So particularly for projects that are below the regulatory thresholds, right, we've seen that they are able to, between a customer and their client, so a project developer and his or her and their customers, they're able to agree on commercially viable pricing, and that enables them to operate profitably and ultimately pay back their facilities. So there've been a number of successful financing in the off-grid space. You wouldn't want to know the number of power projects that are operating in the off-grid space. Particularly, very recently, we've done a number of renewable energy projects that have been successfully financed, from mini grids to solar home systems to there are lots of them. So I would say the major challenge is in the on-grid side of things, because of the challenges I had earlier shared. But in the off-grid space, where they're literally what we have more like willing buyer, willing seller arrangements, right? We've seen a lot of success in financing. And interestingly, the new Electricity Act kind of gives room for that. Provides opportunities for willing buyer, willing seller arrangement, subject to the approval of NEC. That's one for a lot more bigger projects. So, I expect that, in the coming days, things will get better. But yes, there've been a lot of success stories, particularly in the off-grid space.
Amazing. I like the fact that you touched on the renewable energy side of things. And I know earlier on you said renewable energy is a lot faster to deploy. And I was watching, I think, one of your interviews with the BBC, and you said the energy transition must be just, sustainable, and inclusive. My question, based on that, but by the way, I completely agree with that. But my question on top of that is, what types of, should I say, regulation would you like to see in order to help Nigeria foster its energy transition towards net zero by 2060, which is its target? Because I know you've mentioned the current ones, which are helpful,
Yeah.
like the bill from this year, but do you still think that there are still opportunities for more regulation to help foster it towards that? And maybe
Yeah.
where do you think those regulations could be applied?
Yes, so of course there are lots to be done. You know, energy transition it requires very intentional steps if we must get it right. That if you look at the Electricity Act, for the first time we have a statute that actually, recognizes renewable energy. And I don't know if you've seen that, for instance, the Electricity Act contemplates that at some point the DISCOs and the GENCOs will be mandated by the regulator to incorporate a certain amount of renewable energy within the energy mix. That's a very big one for renewable energy in Nigeria, and of course the energy transition ultimately. But there's still more to be done, particularly taking a cue from a number of other countries. I remember reading of something, was it California? I can't remember what country was that, but in the US, so that they actually provided for incentives for people who take up renewable energy. And the way it was structured was that if you buy a renewable energy system, solar energy, whatever renewable energy system you buy, you're allowed to net off the cost of that system over a period of 5 years, right? That was just a policy. And in fact, I was reading, that was just policy, and that drove the growth of the renewable energy source sector in that space. And I remember reading, I think it was last year or so, that China was recorded to have received the greatest investment in terms of renewable energy. And why? They just had the right policies that incentivize people to use renewable energy, that provided incentives to the project developers and sponsors in that space. And those are like the things that investors like to see. Okay, well, for Nigeria, I think the only thing I can recall again, I know we have some VAT exemption for importation of renewable energy products, but that is barely enough. We still do a lot of importation, and one of the things we need to do is improve local production, because of the exchange rate, right? It becomes extremely expensive to take up renewable energy in Nigeria, because you have to import virtually everything from batteries to inverters to panels. Everything is largely imported. And I remember speaking to a project developer sometime earlier it was last year, and it was like, I was asking, why do I import your product? Why not manufacture it in Nigeria? And he was like, it's more expensive for me to manufacture in Nigeria than for me to import. You can imagine, and because of that, he rather imports the product. So I guess one of the things that we need to see is more regulations that make it a lot more friendly for manufacturers to set up renewable energy, manufacturing company, whether it's batteries, panels, whatever it is, components in Nigeria. This will facilitate the transition. Then we also need to see regulations that incentivize consumers, from the consumer end of things, that incentivize them to take up renewable energy, and then also a very notable area that is of great interest to me is what we call renewable energy certificates. So it's an area that that would encourage the growth of renewable energy in Nigeria, and of course aid the transition. I'm sure that's a different topic. I don't want to go into all of that, but what it essentially means is trading on the environmental attributes of renewable energy. So the opportunities are there, and I expect to see regulations in this area. I'm personally working on a project on getting this renewable energy certificates implemented in Nigeria. Hopefully we get that done. But yeah, those are some things.
That would be amazing if we can, because I remember back at uni, I think we studied something similar that happened like that in the West, in the UK specifically, and how that encouraged renewable energy production. So it would be amazing if we can also do the same in Nigeria. I know you also mentioned the challenges of local manufacturing. I think on one of our previous episodes, I think episode 13, we spoke to a startup who are trying to do that. And he spoke about the challenges of doing that in terms of quality. And so I agree, there's still a lot of work to do in terms of making local production attractive. But I think that we will get there eventually. I'm trying to be, I am an optimist. So
I am as well. I believe so much in it. I believe that will work.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so my final question is, I guess, more on the softer side. What lessons have you learned from your journey that you think could be useful to some of our listeners? And this could be either personal, it could be either what you've learned about the energy space, it could be about your career, whatever you think would be useful to someone listening to this conversation.
So many things to say. Okay, so I would like to say that first, that life favors the bold and not the timid, right? And one of the things I've learned is to be bold about your dreams, be bold about what you desire, and go for it, right? Because I'm a firm believer in Nigeria, in Africa. I know things are really bad. I know they're not where they ought to be, but I'm very hopeful. And what I would just say to anyone out there is, know what you're created for. I like to say that, God created everyone with special abilities. With something to give to the world, right? To know what you're created for. Build capacity in that area. Be excellent at it. Take bold step about actualizing it. Be consistent, because one of the things we see with a lot of people is lack of consistency, right? You start up something and it might not be easy, and a lot of people just get to drop off and then move on to the next thing. But sometimes consistency is required to be able to get the result, and ultimately focus on making a positive impact, on adding value wherever you are and whatever you do, right? So that's it for me. And for anyone listening who is interested in the energy sector, the opportunities are enormous. I'll encourage you to take the step, find your niche, and just be good at it.
Oh, that was really powerful. The one that really, really resonated with me was that life rewards the bold and not the timid. So as we're wrapping up right now, we usually have a bonus question that we usually ask all our guests. And the question is this: if you were to travel anywhere in Africa on an all-expense paid trip, where would it be and why?
Where would I like to go to? Well, interestingly, I've always wanted to go to South Africa for some reason. I don't know. If you ask me why, I honestly don't know, but I just love the country. I've heard a lot about, looking at their past, where they came from, the was it apartheid? Yeah, they've had, and how they've navigated to. I know we have Nigeria in particular, they have this, history around racism and all around there. But it's always been a country I love to visit, right? Just to, understand their historical background, where they are. And again, perhaps one of the things that interests me again is the fact that they are doing way, way better than Nigeria in terms of electricity. I think the last time I was reading about them, I was just, impressed by the fact that I think they're doing up to 40 to 45 or 50,000 megawatts, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, thereabouts. And I can imagine a country like Nigeria barely doing 12,000. So it just made it seem like, I know they still have their challenges, right? But it just got me interested in the country. And of course, yeah, I did like to visit them for a start. There are others, but yeah, that would be my first.
Nice. That's very nice. I don't know how much of a music fan you are, but I've heard some people saying they want to go to South Africa mainly because of Amapiano. So maybe that could be something else.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
Cool. Thank you very much for doing this episode with us. I think we've found it really insightful and also really fun. Your experience is really inspiring, and thank you for the words of wisdom that you dropped there. I think it was also inspiring to me, and I'm sure I'm not speaking alone. I'm sure Hassan also found it very insightful and inspiring. Thank you very much for your time, Chinenye.
Thank you so much, Bolaji, for having me. And finally, I'm glad we were able to do this.